Welcome to The Debate. Today, we are delving into an artifact that truly challenges our assumptions about technological capability in the deep past, the Sabu Disc. Discovered nearly a century ago now in Saqqara, this object is a 61-centimeter trilobed disc of Metasiltstone. It dates back to the first Dynasty around 3000 BC. The mystery isn't just its age.
Right.
And this leads us to our central question today. Does the overwhelming archaeological context, which links the disc pretty clearly to food production and sustenance, does that provide the most complete explanation for the Sabu disc, specifically as a utilitarian tool, perhaps like a sophisticated brewing implement? Or does its unparalleled engineering precision and the fact that it's one of a kind suggest a technological capacity, or maybe an experimental design that far exceeds our current understanding of First Dynasty Egypt? I'll be arguing that the disc's primary role was practical and functional, essentially a piece of, let's say, industrial equipment necessary for sustaining the ancient elite.
And I'll be arguing that while the context is certainly suggestive of futility, the sheer, near impossibility of its creation, given the known tools, and its absolute uniqueness, it compels us to view it as evidence of advanced, possibly experimental technology, something that forces us to really reevaluate what the ancient Egyptians were capable of achieving technologically.
Okay. So the evidence for a highly sophisticated yet practical function centers squarely on the tomb's inventory and recent fluid dynamics analysis. The research by Archaeology, which posits the disc functioned as an advanced mash rake for beer production, is highly persuasive, mainly because it aligns so perfectly with the physical evidence found. I mean, look at the archaeological context. The disc was found right next to Prince Sabu's coffin in Mastaba S3111. It was surrounded by grave goods explicitly tied to sustenance and processing. You have flint tools for grain, pottery storage vessels, copper implements, even animal remains. Beer wasn't just a drink back then. It was currency, it was sustenance, and a sacred offering essential for the afterlife.
The context is powerful, I agree, but it might be intentionally misleading, or at least not the whole story.
Well, I don't believe it is misleading when the engineering itself seems to confirm a practical application. Flow experiments using replicas of the disc have demonstrated that the trilobe design isn't just arbitrary. It actively exploits something called the Kawanda effect. That's where a fluid stream tends to follow a curved surface to create these optimal, gentle circular flow patterns. This kind of efficient liquid mixing is crucial for the sophisticated, large-scale brewing processes we know were happening at sites like Abydos and Hierakonpolis around that time.
Okay, but why is gentle mixing such a high-value industrial problem that it requires this level of, frankly, extraordinary technological solution?
Because maximizing yield and maintaining quality in ancient brewing requires really careful temperature management and preventing the oxidation of the mash. You know, violent stirring or poor circulation would degrade the quality, lower the starch conversion rate, and that reduces the essential caloric output of the beer. The disc solves a genuine, high-stakes industrial problem. How do you efficiently and gently circulate massive quantities of liquid in these deep vats to ensure consistent fermentation? This was crucial for royal consumption or large-scale temple offerings. Even the gray color is highly functional. It provides maximum visual contrast against the brown wort, which would aid the brewmaster in, quality control.
I see the logic there, but I come at it from a different way. While the functional analysis regarding fluid dynamics is excellent work, it really only explains the theoretical application of the design. It completely sidesteps the true enigma here, the manufacture of that design. You call it evidence of ingenuity applied to necessity, but the methods apparently used to create it seem to defy necessity. We're dealing with Metasiltstone, which is brittle, it's non-uniform, it fractures easily. First Dynasty artisans had copper tools which are actually softer than the stone, and pretty rudimentary abrasive materials.
They were highly skilled artisans, though.
They were incredibly skilled, absolutely. but achieving 3 lobes precisely 120 degrees apart, with perfect rotational symmetry, seamless transitions, and no visible tool marks or fractures, on such an unforgiving material, that level of precision is, well, it borders on physically miraculous under the traditional view of their tools. Your theory focuses on what the disc does. My primary concern is what the disc is. It's evidence of a technological capability that is just unparalleled for its time.
But you seem to assume that the required precision automatically disqualifies a utilitarian purpose.
Not necessarily non-utilitarian, no, but highly specialized and possibly mechanical. Look, precision in a simple mash rake is a luxury, maybe even overkill. Precision in a mechanical component, however, is often a necessity. The resemblance of this object to modern components like impellers or rotors used in hydraulic systems is, well, it's striking. If it were designed, as some engineers have proposed, to be part of an early centrifugal pump or perhaps some kind of hydraulic element, then the precise dimensional ratios and structural integrity would be absolutely paramount for controlled pressure and flow stability. The precision itself almost dictates a sophisticated mechanical purpose, not just a fancy stirring tool for Prince Sabu's beer.
Okay, let's address the central tension then. Context versus precision. Which holds more weight? For me, the context of the grave goods, sustenance, grain, processing tools, provides the necessary historical anchor. The object's purpose, I think, must be viewed through the lens of First Dynasty cultural practices regarding death and the afterlife. Sustaining the deceased was paramount.
That's an interesting point, though I might reframe the hierarchy of evidence slightly. The sheer resources, the time, the calculation required to produce this singular object from Metasiltstone, it implies a value far beyond a standard brewing equipment, even for royalty. If it were merely a high-end mixer, why not use a more durable, easier to work, or frankly more common material like diorite or basalt? The choice of Metasiltstone, given its difficulty, elevates the object from a utilitarian item to a monumental technical achievement in itself. The precision isn't just a byproduct of skill, it implies a deep, calculated knowledge of things like volumetric consistency and rotational balance, which are necessary for specialized mechanical functions.
But if we grant that the precision is extraordinarily high, why must we assume a non-utilitarian, or let's say a non-brewing function? Perhaps the value came precisely from solving that industrial brewing problem perfectly.
Because we really have to confront the manufacturing riddle head-on. If they only had soft copper drills and stone abrasives, how did they actually carve the intricate inner curves and achieve those perfectly balanced transitions without the stone shattering? It's a fundamental question. The engineering sophistication fundamentally challenges our baseline assumptions about First Dynasty technical limits.
Well, I'm not convinced by the argument that the creation is impossible, mainly because it tends to ignore alternative and I think highly plausible manufacturing hypotheses suggested by modern material science. The suggestion that it was hand-shaped or perhaps molded is critical here.
Hand-shaped for this level of dimensional accuracy? That seems unlikely.
Yes, some researchers hypothesize it may have been formed using a composite material, perhaps metasiltstone powder mixed with something like gypsum or clay, and then shaved while pliable before being sun-dried or hardened somehow. This method actually resolves several issues simultaneously. It could explain the lack of tool marks, the seamless transitions, and the incredible detail while still using materials accessible to First Dynasty artisans. They weren't necessarily cutting brittle stone, they might have been manipulating a composite. And furthermore, contemporary sites do show evidence of advanced workshops, precision drilling techniques, and extremely complex finishing methods on other stone objects. The Sabu Disc in this view is perhaps the ultimate culmination of existing precision craftsmanship, not necessarily proof of impossible technology.
I find that hypothesis fascinating, truly. But let's explore its implications for a moment. Even if an advanced molding or composite method was employed, the implied knowledge of design and fluid dynamics necessary to achieve such optimal efficiency, whether it's for mixing beer or spinning water or something else, still suggests a level of intellectual sophistication that pushes the known limits of their technological culture. It implies the artisan wasn't just talented, they were effectively an intellectual engineer who understood principles of hydrodynamics that wouldn't be formally codified for millennia. That calculated design is what makes it seem experimental and advanced. They were solving a problem using a singular, perhaps theoretical, definitely high-risk solution.
But isn't every great piece of engineering initially a high-risk solution to a problem? You seem to be moving the goalpost slightly from manufacturing capability to the implied theoretical knowledge behind the design. If the design works optimally for a known necessary function like brewing, shouldn't the context dictate the interpretation rather than the perceived difficulty of the knowledge required to conceive it?
Okay, well, let's discuss the issue of uniqueness then, because this is where I think the standard utilitarian argument truly falters. If this design was so ingenious, so efficient, and maybe essential for mass production, or even just elite production, why is it one of a kind? Why don't we find scaled-down replicas in common stone, or simpler, cruder versions made of wood or pottery?
Well, its uniqueness could be explained by simple rarity, or its function as a highly specialized, very high-value tool reserved only for the absolute elite, fitting for a prince like Sabu's tomb. Perhaps the material cost or the specialized knowledge required to make even a composite version made it economically unfeasible for broader replication. The design principles themselves, the curved flow dynamics, are demonstrably practical. Modern comparative studies show these same principles are used today in industrial mixing, everything from chemical processing to pharmaceuticals. The disc, you could say, anticipates later technological developments not because it was some alien component, but because it was an ingenious, probably expensive, and highly customized solution to a real-world, high-value industrial problem of its time.
But the fact that it anticipates later technology is exactly my point. The argument that it was too expensive or difficult to replicate only strengthens my position that it represents an advanced, non-standard component. Perhaps an isolated triumph of theoretical engineering that just never transitioned into mass production. If the design was truly functional and necessary for the mass breweries we know existed at Heracanopolis, surely they would have found some way to reproduce it, even in simpler ceramic or wood. The complete lack of any related simpler tools or similar artifacts strongly suggests either a failed commercial experiment, maybe a purely ceremonial function mirroring a conceptual design, or a highly specialized mechanical purpose that simply failed to achieve widespread adoption. It just doesn't conform to the logic of a standardized utilitarian item.
Its singularity is a powerful indicator of its unique, possibly experimental, technological status in the First Dynasty.
So, as we conclude, I still believe the context is the most critical piece of evidence here. The utilitarian theory, specifically its application as let's call it a high-efficiency mash rake, is supported by the direct archaeological context of food production artifacts, and it's backed up by robust scientific analysis confirming its optimal efficiency for liquid mixing via fluid dynamics. The Sabu Disc, I maintain, is powerful evidence of the remarkable ingenuity applied to essential First Dynasty industrial needs, where precise craftsmanship solved a practical economic problem.
And I come at it from a different way. While the brewing theory is certainly plausible based on its location, yes, the profound mystery of its creation, particularly from Metasiltstone, and its unparalleled engineering precision, it forces us to consider it as a sign of ancient Egyptian capabilities that perhaps we severely underestimate. It really challenges us to look beyond simple utility and recognize the possibility of highly advanced, singular, or even purely experimental technological achievements in the First Dynasty, perhaps pointing toward a conceptual mechanical function we just haven't fully identified yet.
Ultimately, both perspectives, I think, illuminate the highly sophisticated understanding of physics and engineering embedded in the design of this 5,000-year-old puzzle. The Sabu Disc remains a profound testament to technical mastery and human innovation, regardless of its exact function. It certainly reminds us there is much more to explore in the material when we rigorously challenge our assumptions about the past.